This morning, is the Tea Party losing influence in the suburbs? Euless elected a Muslim man to city council despite people using his religion to campaign against him. Understaffing is making some Texas prisons very dangerous, why the state is down thousands of guards and what it's going to take to fix it. The new state law designed to build trust between police and minorities. State Senator Royce West wrote it last year but says it needs work as it's rolled out. West is our guest this morning. And Governor Abbott's private meeting with 41 African-American pastors from Dallas. What did he want from them? We'll ask one of the organizers in studio.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley on WFAA.
Good morning. We begin with that new state law rolling out. It's called the Community Safety Education Act, supposed to improve trust between police and minorities. But the lawmaker who put it together, State Senator Royce West, says it needs some tweaking. That is one of the topics we're going to ask him about. And joining the questioning, as always, is Bud Kennedy of the Star-Telegram. Senator, good to see you. Bud, thanks for coming in.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Let's start with this new law. Remind people what it includes, Senator, and what needs to be changed on it already.
Okay, what it includes is the following. We have put into the driver's education manual what the behavioral expectations are of police and citizens doing traffic interactions and other interactions. We believe by putting that information in there that it will better equip both police officers and citizens with what is expected of them. Now, again, as I told you, it's a four-leg prong. We're also taking the content and putting it into our schools. We're putting it into the police academies, and we're also putting it into the driver education programs. What's happening now is that the Texas Education Agency, through the State Board of Education, is now promulgating rules for the various school districts, which citizens will have an opportunity to basically respond to. And some of the rules as it relates to what school districts will be required to do starting this fall, 2018-2019, is to design courses between the 9th and 12th grade that students receive this information in terms, as an example, what is it must include information about a person's rights concerning interaction with a peace officer, laws relating to questioning and detention by peace officers, how and where to file a compliment on behalf of a police officer, and also a complaint on behalf of a police officer. And importantly, that you must also, the schools must make certain that on the transcripts of every student, regardless of the color of their skin, that there's something on the transcripts that shows that students have received this information.
Now, we agreed this was something that was needed, but you're saying something needs to be changed. What needs to be changed?
I think that what needs to happen is, we're going to be looking at the complaint process, because we're getting information that it's all over the place in terms of how do I file a complaint in Dallas versus how do I file a complaint in, as an example, I don't know, in Duncanville.
Are they the same? Police officer, who
would file a complaint against who?
Well, again, if a citizen has a complaint, should there be uniform standards throughout the state of Texas of what that complaint process should be based on the various types of complaints that are filed, and should there be a uniform system of investigating those complaints?
And you're talking about a citizen filing complaints against someone in law enforcement?
Or filing a compliment.
Or a compliment.
Right.
We've talked about this bill when it was legislation, the law when it was a bill before. I'm curious, how will you measure success with this new law?
In terms of the reduction of the number of complaints against police officers, and frankly, the increase in the number of complaints. I will also measure it based on making certain that we hopefully see a reduction in the number of, how should I say it, stress situations defined as police shootings of citizens doing traffic interaction, or fights by citizens of police officers doing those types of interactions.
Well, now we know that people are being told how to conduct themselves when stopped, but what is the punishment for a police officer? What is the discipline for police officers? Someone might file a complaint with Internal Affairs?
Exactly. Or if Internal Affairs determines that there's criminal action or criminal conduct, then they obviously will send it to the district attorney's office. But what happens, Bud, is this. What we're being told now, anecdotally, is that sometimes people will go to a police department to try to file a complaint, and frankly, they're discouraged In fact, there in many instances they run away from filing the complaint for fear of reprisal by the police department. I'm not saying that it's true. That's what we're being told, and we believe that we need to look at that to make certain that that is not the case.
What would be the normal action on any other complaint against an officer? It'd be to go to the district attorney. It'd be to take it to another level. What would it be?
Well, in terms of you hit the nail on the head. The fact is that if you can't get it done through the police department, you need to go to the district attorney's office. But we want to make certain this legislation is the result of law enforcement and civil rights organizations working with me and others in order to make it this particular law. And it's been very collaborative in terms of the rules that are being promulgated through the Texas Education Agency, through the police departments, through their training process. And so I believe that we'll be able to look at the complaint process during this interim, and if it needs to be adjusted, we'll do that.
You think it does, though? It sounds like, right?
Well, based on what we're hearing. Now, and again, what you're hearing and what's fact may very well be different.
Let's shift off to education here, Senator, as well,
Sure.
too. UNT wants to open a new campus in Frisco. You're on the Senate Higher Education Committee, and you have concerns about that. What are they?
Well, I mean, the fact is that if UNT, not UNT system, UNT wants to open another campus, then obviously in Frisco, they're going to have to make the case for it. What I understand what they want to do is have some extension programs there. And the fact is that we've got to look at whether or not that's a prudent use of taxpayers' dollars, given everything we're doing in higher education, given the limited number of resources that we currently have.
Do you think it is?
Well, I mean, the fact is that I haven't been approached. I would have thought that they would have called me before making that announcement, but they didn't. But I do plan on speaking with them about it.
Royce, talk about the Democratic ticket.
The Democratic lawsuit?
The Democratic ticket.
I thought you were talking about the lawsuit.
We asked you if there was going to be an African American near the top of the Democratic state ticket, and you said yes. You know, tell me where African Americans find people who look like African Americans to vote for on the Democratic ballot.
Well, I think that number one, I want to say that I told you also that Republican lawsuit filed in Dallas County was frivolous, and it was frivolous.
It was dismissed.
It was what?
It was dismissed, which we've talked about in the program as well, too.
I know. But in terms of this particular issue, the fact is that no, there aren't any African Americans on the ticket. And the question is whether or not the candidates that are on the ticket will be able to appeal to the African American base. What that's going to entail is this: they've got to make certain that they do ample outreach like that they hadn't done before. What I do see is, and you take for the governor.
The governor came and met with African American pastors in Dallas last week. He's already reaching out to African Americans.
Well, that's exactly right, and that's what the Democrats are going to have to do. But reaching out is one thing. Actually working a plan that's important to African Americans is altogether something different. You can reach out as much as you want to. There are different priorities that we have in the African American community. Education. We can't keep on doing the same old thing. And I've talked to the governor's people about this, and we'll continue to talk to other candidates about it. And those persons that have real plans that involve African American input, African American rollout, will be those persons that I'll support.
You said governor, which one?
I'm going to be supporting Lupe Valdez. She's my constituent.
All right. State Senator Royce West, we appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Texas prisons face a problem. There is a shortage of guards, and assaults on existing officers, they are on the rise. This didn't happen overnight, but it is just now getting the attention of Austin because of the reporting of the Texas Tribune. And that's where Ross Ramsey is every morning, the co-founder and executive editor of the Trib. Good morning to you, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well. You know, this is a fascinating story you guys kind of uncovered here. Understaffing is really making some prisons pretty dangerous. Explain how we got here and what it's going to take to fix it.
Yeah, part of this, the particular prison in question here is the Telford unit of the Texas prison system up in New Boston, up in Northeast Texas, and they are understaffed by about 35%, by about 200 guards, and it's become a dangerous place both for the guards who are there and for the prisoners who are there. Largely, this is driven by high employment. You know, there are other jobs. If you've got other jobs to choose from, prison guard's kind of at the bottom of your list, and that's showing up in the prison's payroll.
Interesting. Good economy means tough break over there for those guys. Let me shift off to a story making headlines up here in the Dallas area. In July, a California company is going to bring self-driving cars to Texas, obviously the land of fewer regulations. What will lawmakers be watching for, if anything?
I think they're going to be watching for traffic accidents. You know, the news on driverless cars has tended to be whenever they go wrong. You know, first there's the prospect of you could get in a car and it'll go wherever you want. The second is does it know what it's doing? And as I understand it, they're going to start this experiment with people in the driver's seat just in case.
Gotcha. Back to you in just a moment, Ross. Thank you. Two of the biggest headlines out of D.C. last week were Iran and North Korea. Our next contributor argues that both are big wins for President Trump. Here's Debbie Georgatos from 660 AM The Answer with My Voice, My Opinion.
Leftists have forever argued that America, asserting a role as protector of freedom and defender against the world's bullies, is dangerous and destabilizing. But the opposite is true. Thanks to strong American leadership, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has released American prisoners in anticipation of a summit with President Trump to talk about denuclearization. The Iran deal that offered fake protection against real nuclear weapons development and allowed the mullahs to funnel $150 billion to terrorists is a deal no more. Powerful sanctions plus support for the oppressed Iranian people send the right message. Leftists bitterly clinging to the Iranian deal as today's Peace in Our Times claim that confronting bullies is dangerous. It is, but appeasing Iran and North Korea emboldened them. Speaking up and then standing up against them is the only way to stop them. I'm Debbie Georgatos, and this is My Voice, My Opinion.
It was a private meeting between Governor Abbott and 41 African-American and Hispanic pastors in Dallas. What did he want from them? We'll ask one of the organizers next in studio. And Domingo Garcia complimented President Trump. It actually stopped Mark in his tracks this morning. Their conversation from Flashpoint in 3 minutes. First, your Sunday Funnies.
To the news, this is just crazy. It came out that Trump's lawyer may have paid off Stormy Daniels using money he got from the Russians. When Rudy Giuliani heard that, he was like, whoa, boy.
Don't miss Belk's Mother's Day sale. 10% off bonus buys for the first time ever. Buy one, get one free Crown and Ivy. $19.99 Yellow Box. $17.99 Belk Silverworks. Plus, give her a Clinique gift set. Shop Belk and Belk.com.
Looking for something more intelligent in your next sedan? Well, look no further than Hyundai. The Sonata is packed with technology and comes from the brand named #1 in customer loyalty 9 years running. The Elantra is all brains with smart brakes and smart cruise control that adjust to changing traffic. All on top of America's best warranty. So every Hyundai sedan is a great deal more than just a great deal. Get up to $4,000 total savings on the Sonata or 0% APR plus $1,000 bonus cash. Visit buyhyundai.com.
Empire Today here to introduce a revolution in flooring, only available at Empire. Home Fresh Carpet. If you have asthma or allergies like me, or just want to keep your home clean, Home Fresh Carpet is a game changer. Unlike traditional carpet, dust and dirt vacuum up easier, it's mold and mildew resistant, and it helps eliminate odors. Love carpet again with Home Fresh, hypoallergenic, odor-reducing carpet. 800-588-2300. Exclusively at Empire Today. Empire
Today. AT&T gives you more for your thing.
Okay, so now that it's in the pan, the next step is the most important step.
Get AT&T Internet with over 99% reliability for $30 a month. More for your adulting thing. That's our thing. Visit att.com.
Affordable dentures and implants. What are implants?
They lock in a denture so it doesn't move. They're life-changing.
Can we afford them?
We can now. They made implants affordable.
You do look great.
We feel even better. Time to get our smile back. Time to get our life back.
Lock down your denture with affordable implants. Call 1-800-2-IMPLANT today. One call and one day can change your tomorrow.
The compact Lincoln MKC with a healthy sense of exhilaration. A cabin that's a sanctuary. And a lane-keeping system that helps keep you on track, giving you a new perspective. The Lincoln MKC.
The Lincoln Spring Sales event is here. For a limited time, lease the Lincoln MKC for $281 a month, only at your Lincoln dealer.
Don't miss Belk's Mother's Day sale. 10% off bonus buys for the first time ever. 50% off sleepwear and robes. 50% off new directions. $9.99 Kim Rogers. Plus earn Belk Bucks with no brand exclusions. Shop Belk and Belk.com.
The meeting wasn't publicized. Governor Abbott flew in and out of the airport in Mesquite for a brief gathering between him and 41 African-American and Hispanic pastors. The governor has more than $40 million in the bank. Polls show him as the most popular politician in the state. So what did Abbott want to talk to them about? Ron Price is a community leader. He's a former Dallas ISD school board member, and he is the current CEO of the Genesis Research and Technology Group. You helped get everyone together.
Yes, sir.
It's good to see you again, man.
Good to see you as well. It's been a while. But it's good to see you.
It has. This was a private meeting. The governor wanted in on this. What did he want?
Well, he's wanted to have a dialogue with African-American pastors, because most of the time the pastors are the individuals who are out with the people in the community every Sunday. Thousands of African-Americans are in front of their pastors. So he wanted to have a direct contact with some of these pastors, not the usual suspect, not the big names, but the folks who are really out there with the people in the trenches, and have an opportunity to talk to them and dialogue with them about state funding, the criminal justice system, the education system, and any question that the pastors had. It wasn't one of those situations where they had questions sent out. He opened the floor for any questions. Pastors had tons of questions for the governor.
This was a private meeting. We weren't allowed inside.
Sure.
What did the pastors tell him? What was the governor's response?
He had some excellent response. A lot of the pastors concentrated on the funding systems in the state of Texas. Regards to education as well. Okay. Education was a major issue. I had some pointers about that as well. But criminal justice was really important. Pastor Donald Parrish from Truly Missionary Baptist Church in South Dallas really touched on the issue of reentry programs and the proper funding. There's a lot of people around this church are getting out of jail, getting out of prison. They cannot find a job, and so subsequently they repeat offenders. So we really touched on that issue, and the governor touched on that issue as well. And what was really important was that the governor started giving out cell phone numbers to his staff. He didn't give office numbers out. He gave these 41 pastors personal cell numbers, and he told everyone, these people don't know I'm doing this, but I want you to call them direct, and they better answer your phone calls.
What's your reaction to the governor wanting this meeting?
I was happy about it. You know, he reached out, some of the folks on his staff reached out to me and said, we want to do something special, not just in Dallas, but they want to also do this in East Texas and Houston and San Antonio. And I told him I would work with them to make that happen in those different cities. And he just wanted to reach out to the community and talk. And something I talked to the governor about, there's something we say in the United States right now that we have walls separating people. And I said, there's no such thing as walls. In some cases, walls are good because there's a monster on the other side. I said, our problem here in the United States is that we have soundproof glass. I can see that you're Republican. I can see you're a Democrat. I can see that you're white. I can see that you're Hispanic. I can see that you're Asian. I can see that you're Arab. But I can't hear you, and I can't talk to you. So we need to break through that soundproof glass. And this is the first step yesterday, to break through that glass so we can start dialoguing and talking to one another.
Was this a campaign stop, Ron?
No, it was just, he really wanted to just reach out to people. You can look at it as campaign, but he researched and found me through other people and said, I want to work with Ron. And I said, I want to work with you, Governor. Let's make it happen. Regardless if he's Republican or Democrat, we just want to do something special for the people in the state of Texas. You
talked about the wall, so does this mean you have more support for Governor Abbott, or these pastors have more support for him now?
Well, it's just a dialogue. It wasn't about trying to get a photo op. That's why we didn't have any cameras. That's why it wasn't no media blitz. We didn't sit down the press release.
Do you support him now?
Huh?
Do you support the governor?
I've always supported the governor. I support.
Would you vote for him?
Did I vote for him?
Would you vote for him?
Would I vote for him?
He's on the ballot in November.
You know, you have a special state senator who was here a few minutes ago, and he knows where I live at. I got to be careful with my answer. But I do like the governor a great deal. All right. And Governor Abbott is a good friend, and I support the governor. I believe in what he's trying to do for all Texans, regardless of party. He's a good man, and he want to do the right thing. When he expressed to me that he didn't want any media, that's in a clear message that he's serious about a dialogue with the African American community.
Gotcha. Ron Price, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Congratulations on the meeting.
Appreciate you.
Influence is a word at the center of all politics, but when that influence comes from outside the country, that's what sparked Flashpoint this morning. From the right, Mark Davis of 660 AM The Answer, and from the left, former Democratic State Rep Domingo Garcia.
Thanks, Jason. Good Sunday, everybody. And hey, dig our new graphic. Listen, if President Trump and Kim Jong-un can get together, Domingo and I can reach compromise on the two things we want to talk about. I'm guessing he wants to hit me up with the Avenatti, Stormy's lawyer, Russia thing, as if this is something. How close am I?
Well, you know, one of my favorite movies back from the Cold War was The Manchurian Candidate, about a foreign power who controlled a president. And here we got a president, 2 out of his 3 wives, including his current one, are from communist bloc countries. His personal lawyer is admitted taking money from Russian oligarchs.
Well, actually, he's done no such thing.
Well, it's been out there in the press, and pretty sure it's not been denied.
And what significance is that? The Russian oligarch. There's no criminality there. There's nothing. There's no there.
And of course, Trump Jr.'s meetings with Putin and Earl Flynn's meetings with Putin. Not Earl Flynn, Michael Flynn.
Right.
So you show that there's a lot of Russian influence and puppeteering with our president, and then all of a sudden he decides to go to Korea. It sounds a lot like Nixon trying to avoid Watergate by going to China.
Now here's my half. North Korea, the return of those 3 Americans. Tell me that was not magnificent. Tell me it was not because of this president.
No, I think it's great. I give him kudos on that one.
We got 30 seconds left. Well, I'll tell you what let's do. And you know what? I knew he was going to do that.
But doesn't it take away? Aren't you concerned as a Republican about the communists having so much influence over this presidency, or having some type of extortion?
Not this presidency, because we're not going to give in to him. Not this. I mean,
he fires Comey, and the next day he has the Russian ambassador in the White House. The first time that's ever happened. That doesn't ring alarms in your old post-communist.
I'm as alert to communism.
Cold War
I'm as alert to communism as I have ever been. I just feel better about it under this president. From the red half, 6:60 a.m. The Answer, Mark Davis.
And from the blue half, Domingo Garcia.
Is the Tea Party losing influence in the suburbs? Euless just elected a Muslim man to city council despite people using his religion to campaign against him. That's where we'll begin next on Reporters Roundtable.
It's time to upgrade. And now, it's even easier at Nissan's Tech for All sales event. Get 0% financing on every model, including Rogue with Pro Pilot Assist. Experience Nissan's newest lane centering technology.
Get here today. Save up to $2,530 or get a low $199 per month lease on the 2018 Nissan Rogue.
But hurry, this event ends soon.
Guys, we have Jim taking on our giant steak challenge. If he eats it all, it's free. Go, Jim, go. Go, Jim, go.
There are some things in life you only want to do once, like foundation repair. If your house is beginning to settle, don't settle for anything less than Ramjack Foundation Repair. Ramjack's American-made products are ISO certified and recognized by the International Code Council. Don't do it twice. Do it right. Rely on Ramjack.
Country roads take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home.
First little doggy was a white one, that little birdie was too. Second little doggy.
Leaving a career to follow a calling takes courage.
Pair of shoes and they were free.
A personalized financial strategy can give you confidence to take the next step.
Hi, guys.
Doggies off to see the world. Oh, yeah.
See how access to JP Morgan investment expertise can help you. Chase, make more of what's yours.
Incredible spring mattress specials have arrived at Nebraska Furniture Mart. Shop now, save big. All qualifying Serta and Sealy mattresses are on sale. Combine these savings with up to 75-month mattress financing. This Serta mattress is just $4.99. Pay as little as $20 per month. A Sealy mattress is just $5.29. Pay as little as $21 a month. All your favorite brands, all in one store. Don't miss out. Shop spring mattress specials at Nebraska Furniture Mart.
Life is good, and at Robeson Ranch, a Robeson Resort community for active adults, it just keeps getting better. Come explore our exceptional resort lifestyle at Robeson Ranch. Tour stunning model homes featuring visionary designs. Then enjoy great food and discover for yourself our world-class resort lifestyle. Visit Robeson.com for details. Robeson Ranch, a life as big as Texas.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley on WFAA.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Bud and Ross both still with us, and Bernadine Steptoe, Channel 8's political producer, joins us each week as well. Ross, will start with you. And early voting beginning tomorrow. Governor Abbott already out with ads attacking Lupe Valdez on abortion and as too liberal. What's his strategy on this?
Well, I think calling her too liberal in a Democratic primary runoff and saying that she's pro-choice is probably helping her with Democratic runoff voters. And, you know, at this moment, it looks like an in-kind help for her rather than an attack.
He wants to run against her, huh?
I think that's directly his strategy. You know, the polls show that a race with Andrew White would be closer. You know, Abbott's almost picking his opponent here. He's saying, "Don't you run against me, Loopy." So, you know, it'll favor her in the primary.
Surprised to see this?
I totally agree that it favors her. It just regenerates her people.
It gets them out there to vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about Senator Cornyn too, Ross. He said he doesn't understand why Texas and Attorney General Paxton are suing over DACA. He's the #2 Republican in the Senate, and, you know, he's kind of going after his own people here. How's this going to work out?
Well, I think they're trying to put together a deal in the Senate. They've been trying to do this for a long time, and having a bunch of lawsuits flying around about immigration doesn't help them put something together in an election year. I think he's trying to close a deal.
You know, the right wing has gone after Cornyn before. Look who their opponent was last time, Steve Stockman. We see where he is now. They keep threatening that we're going to come get you, John Cornyn, but they never do.
Well, that's true, and the majority of Texans favor DACA. So he doesn't have any political peril in that respect. But it's a popular law at this point. Well, not law, but a
70%.
Popular effort. Yeah, 70%.
And Paxton said the entire time, too, that you know, hey, President Trump's rescinding of DACA has gotten tied up in courts. Congress isn't acting, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. Does Congress really have a chance to get something passed here? You roll your eyes. Roll your eyes. That's a no, huh? Let's shift off to Euless as well. It elected an American Muslim to city council, Salman Bojani, despite State Rep Jonathan Stickland's campaigning against him, using Bojani's religion against him. What does this say about Tea Party influence?
I don't think it says a lot in that particular race, because Euless is a diverse city. And I think that they're showing that they're not as tolerant of divisiveness as Stickland did, but I think that city is pretty diverse.
It showed that Stickland's technique probably didn't work. Stickland issued a big Muslim alert and a warning to Euless voters. That triggered a backlash, including, the stories really haven't talked about this, some evangelical pastors and Christian pastors who rose up and said, we cannot let faith determine who's on city council.
So that's an interesting trend. Does that suggest that the suburbs are changing, or Euless might just be a little different?
Euless is a little more diverse.
Yeah, it's a little bit
the Tea Party has lost its last several races. They have one more runoff coming up. They've lost their last few races in that part of the county.
Gotcha.
Yes, I think it's more of that city, other than whether or not the Tea Party is losing influence. I don't think we could tell with that particular race.
Gotcha. Thank you guys very much. Ross, thank you as well, too. We appreciate you watching as well. ABC's This Week starts in just a moment. We'll see you next Sunday. Hope you have a good day.